Hi, everyone. Both Mark and I are real excited today to chat with you about how you can really take advantage of labor market data and power it inside an LMS to kind of build a more resilient workforce. And I think before we kind of dive into the presentation, maybe Mark, you want to give a little background on yourself, and I can do the same.
Happy to. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to present with one of our great partners. We've thoroughly enjoyed it and excited to talk about the world of labor market intelligence. I've been in this world about 11 years. I've been at Lightcast for about 6 years now, running their skills strategy, everything from building new products to doing research to helping consulting and partnerships. And so get to do a little bit of everything. And before that, I was a customer for 5 years. Used to run people analytics at United Health Group, and we use Lightcast data in a whole variety of different aspects, from supply and demand and competitive research to DEI and comp benchmarking to skills transformation projects. So excited to be talking with you all and explain a little bit about our partnership and how our data helps out.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We're excited to have you with us. For the folks on the call, I've been in the talent development and corporate learning space for about a decade now. Prior to Bridge, I actually had founded an AI-powered career pathing platform where we were helping companies really grow and develop their employees by understanding their skills. Since then, we had been acquired, and now at Bridge, I'm the Vice President of Talent Solutions, really building out the AI skills and employee development strategy within our LMS. And in terms of the agenda today that we have for you, we're going to spend a little bit of time just sharing, what's happening in the world of work today, how are skills evolving, and why that actually matters for businesses. We're then going to dive into a little bit around if you're in the process of building any sort of, career framework, job framework, you're trying to analyze, what are the mission critical skills within your business. We want to share with you some limits that, building a static framework does for your business in this dynamic world. And Mark's going to spend a lot of time sharing about how you can actually use more dynamic labor market data to identify the right skills that your business should be building and developing. And after kind of understanding what the power of labor market data does for you, I'm going to spend some time showing within the Bridge LMS, how do you kind of power that and turn that into action? And yeah, before we dive into this session, maybe Mark, you want to share a little bit about Lightcast, and I can do the same for Bridge.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so if you're unfamiliar with Lightcast, we gather the world's labor information. We aggregate from many different sources, from job postings data. We scrape in about 10 million a night, all the way to professional profiles and resume data, where we have over 1 billion profiles in our database. And that gives us a full understanding of what is going on in the supply of skills, the demand of skills, how are they changing? And as we classify and organize that data and build models off it, we can track the trends along the way and see how the market is shifting and where skills are being utilized and how are they relating to one another organically. And so it's really about tracking how things are changing, and then how do we apply that to your business and change your talent strategies around recruiting and hiring, around targeting development, around mobility and pathways. And then the latest topic we've been talking about is archetyping new jobs and pivoting our jobs in the reflection of how AI is affecting them. And so a lot of really interesting work goes into helping make our strategy more robust to understand the skills we need within our organization, and then how do we gather up and inventory the skills that we have and do that analysis for everything from those tactical solutions to strategic workforce planning.
Yeah, and for Bridge, we're a mid-market learning management platform, but in the past couple of years, we've been focusing a lot around helping organizations not just focus on kind of the mandatory compliance training, but become deeply developmental. So we've been moving into areas of how do you build, help your employees really identify the right skills, the right roles in your organization that they should be pursuing, and then how do you drive that strategy directly from the LMS. And with Lightcast today, I think together, we can really show you how you can take advantage of, this rapidly changing skills environment. How can you, make sure that the right sort of upskilling and reskilling strategies are in place within your business so that you can drive, again, more career mobility for your employees. And I'm going to pass it over to Mark to share at least a little bit more around what does it mean to have access to labor market data.
Thanks, Akash. Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's three main sources where we're gathering data. Mentioned online profiles and resumes and postings, but we're also tracking the world's government labor data. So think occupation data, industry data, things like that. And that helps us get a baseline for those broader macro trends. And our economists that work at Lightcast have drove really deep into this data, and we've produced a couple reports which I'll mention, and we're going to cover what are some of those recent trends that we're seeing. But it's really a global problem that we're facing, and I'll highlight that a little bit. But as we stack all these data points together, this is where we get that rich information that can be applied within your organization, and also the HR tech tools that you are using, like Bridge, where we've embedded our skills data as well as some of our labor market intelligence in there to drive a better experience and give you access to kind of what's happening outside your four walls. The beauty of this too is we've also been gathering this data for we started 26 years ago. We've been gathering this data for a long time, and we have data on all of your organizations, because any public data out there, we've been able to pull that in. So it's a great way for some of our smaller teams that don't have access to their data to say, yep, there's data that's already readily accessible and already classified and built into be able to benchmark that data. So yeah, rich data sets that we're working with to combine all this together to bring our intelligence to bear. So we're going to be talking a lot about skills today and skills gaps. And the unique part of Lightcast is, we needed a way to organize all of that rich labor market data that we're pulling in. We needed a way to classify it and organize it, make sense of it, so that we could actually build the trends and relationship models so that we can see what's actually happening. And so we built out a robust taxonomy of over 30,000 skills to help get to that nuance and granular way of describing work and describing, where people went to, tracking their career pathways and what skills they've picked up in different jobs. It's been a really rich data set, and 87% of organizations are actually talking about skills and skill gaps right now. This is from some McKinsey research. But if we jump to the next slide, we can see that few are actually doing something, with it. They've identified areas where they could jump in and use this. They know that the skill gaps are affecting their business performance, but it's shocking that so few are actually taking action on this. And they're experiencing higher recruitment costs. They're experiencing limited innovation and being able to adapt their business growth because they don't know enough about it. And there's a direct impact to the financials there, because mostly they've been trying to manage from old job frameworks like job titles and job families, and they're begging for a different way to do this. So on the next slide, we'll highlight, where most of the organizations don't know where to start. Skills is one of those complicated topics where it touches everything, but it's hard to wrangle and get your arms around where do we apply this? How do we start to think about this from the supply of skills to our employees' skills? How do we start to think about the skills that we need and how it's describing the work? How does it interact with our core HR systems? And so it's tough just to wrap your arms around where do we put the data, and then only 17% think that they can actually anticipate the emerging skills. And so without having a source of external data, it's really hard to do this unless you have really good interviewing skills and you have some good futurists in your company that are thinking ahead and tracking what the latest trends are. And then only 20% are actually pushing these into their strategies today. So there's a long ways to go. Luckily, a lot of the core systems and a lot of this has been helped with generative AI to where now it's much easier to scale and apply this data. And so the promise of skills future is much more likely. On the next slide, the urgency around this is thinking back to, like, where has there been companies that have said, trying to track these trends. And one of the famous quotes from Ken Olsen, which was if you remember Digital Equipment Corporation, it's a very old company, and the reason why they're no longer around is he said there's no reason anybody would want a computer in their home. It was all about having the big business computer system set up with the big servers on site at companies, and he couldn't see the future of where they're going. And so we are all really bad at predicting the future, but we can use a lot of external data and research to help us along the way. And so as we jump into this, if we go to the next slide, we definitely don't want to become a blockbuster along the way, and miss that trend. But as we're tracking the trends, one of the most interesting and a little bit scary things is we are in a labor shortage, with declining birth rates and participation in the labor force dropping, aging populations, the baby boomer retirement, all the way down to, if you read our Rising Storm report, and we're also going to send a link out to the podcast version of that report, it lays out all the economic research showing, how are all these like perfect storm of trends stacking on top of each other, even down to the opioid epidemic, to to just people for some reason leaving the workforce during the COVID era, and then not coming back. And so some of this is a little bit unknown, but the numbers are there to support that we don't have enough talent, and globally it's projected to not pick back up. And so we are entering into a new era where we're not going to have the talent readily available to bring into our org. We're going to have to start poaching from other companies, and that becomes expensive. So it's not that we won't be able to find people, it's just that our wage inflation will be increasing quite a bit, and that's hard to sustain margins and hard to sustain profitability along the way. And so as we think about how do we transform our organizations to understand what we need within our business, how do we augment our jobs, how do we have a focus on skills to understand what levers we can pull, we can focus on retention strategy and upskilling and reskilling motions, is a perfect way that we can combat a lot of these trends and help control some of those rising costs of hiring people, as well as the increase in salary inflation. And so just to give you an example of where this is, we had over 5 million people leave the workforce during the pandemic. We had a projected gain of about 6.4 people. And so that has helped with what we need in 2032 with around 4.4, but only a portion of that 6.4 is available. And we still have a 3 million person gap to cover. And so this is just going to only get worse in the next 10 to 20 years here, as we're trying to figure out where are we going to find the people to do this work. And so we have to really adjust our strategies and inform our leaders to say, we no longer can just post a job and expect hundreds of candidates to show up. It's going to be much more difficult to find quality talent. And so how are we going to adjust our talent strategies to accompany this? I encourage you all to, in the follow-up documents, we'll have the full report to the Rising Storm, and it's a great one to send to your C-suite, to kind of show them, like, hey, how are we addressing this? How are we planning for the future? And on top of the labor shortage, the other scary thing is the speed of skills change. As technology is changing, as work is changing, as the way that people engage with what needs to be done with work, either through AI disruption or digitalization and even robotics, the skills needed for jobs are moving at the most rapid pace we've ever seen. As we've looked back at the historical data and say, what were the core skills 20 years ago to now, and even 10 years ago and 5 years ago, that rapid change, that acceleration is speeding up. And so this is one thing that we have to pay attention to, that we can't just write a job description and expect it to last for 5 years. It's like, nope, we're going to have to start reviewing some of our key critical roles, think sales, cybersecurity, things like that. That'll need to be reviewed much more quickly within our job architecture to keep pace with the new technology and the new ways of working, especially around how AI is changing so many jobs and adding more productivity and taking out some of those basic tasks out of the job descriptions. It's moving faster than ever. And so we have a full report, if you're interested, on breaking this down into different industries and different occupation segments to track what skills are changing and how fast they are. So we don't want all of this to be doom and gloom, because, like I mentioned, there is a light at the end of this tunnel here, and we want to make sure that when we talk about becoming a skills-based organization, there are simple ways that we can get started with this. Akash is going to walk you through some easy ways that we can do that within their platform later. And it's all about getting a skills lens on our architecture, because once we can get that in there, we can enable the AI, we can enable the machine learning within these systems to help make better recommendations, and start to understand what jobs do we need to change and how often. So this is, a wonderful way that we can combat this, the scary things ahead from a talent perspective. And, we want to make sure that we could let our teammates and our organizations know that if we do this, we will become more adaptable and equitable and innovative in how we approach work and how we, figure out how we connect people learning and work together, and using skills as that connective data tissue between all of them.
Would you say too, Mark, that a lot of the organizations you guys are working with are becoming way more flatter as they start thinking about a skills first approach and not job titles?
They are, yeah. We have many companies experiencing with even project work and getting rid of the concept of a job altogether. Now, that's several years away, but they're thinking in terms of like, how do we make a more fungible workforce to pivot to where the business need is, so that we don't have to, continually hire and lay off people when a certain division, isn't performing as well. How do we create a more flexible approach? And so sometimes that's getting flatter. Sometimes it's just saying, hey, for this department, let's experiment with just getting rid of, rigid jobs that people have to sit in. Can they flex and do a few different jobs and do more project assignment? And so I wanted to talk about the ROI of skills, because this is one thing where, to go down this journey, there has to be a reason to do it. And so the keeping, the same way we're doing things is not going to cut it. You're going to fall behind your competitors. You're going to be spending way too much in the market. You're going to not be retaining people, and everyone knows the cost of turnover is extreme. And so we usually start in our process of saying, hey, there's a flow to this, of diagnosing where we're at. What is our technology? What is our appetite to change? What is our culture like? How do we start to educate and plan and connect what we plan to do to our business goals, and making sure that we can start to augment some of the work that we're doing with a skills-based lens, and starting to adopt a common skill taxonomy, so that we can start to drive better data-driven decisions, so that our teams can analyze and start to make recommendations to the leaders on what levers can we pull in different parts of the business. And we want to get to that optimization part of where we start to use this for strategic workforce planning around, what skills should we be building and which jobs, and prioritizing those. How do we think about moving talent and making it more fungible? How do we screen and match for the right skills as we're bringing that in, and understanding the external labor dynamics that we're in, and which markets are less expensive that we could be going in? Is there an alternative role that we could be hiring, that we could bring them in and upskill them, and we can start to control costs in a unique way? So it's really important as we think about a skills-based org, that we have skills that are connected to the external world, so that we can be tracking what's happening, and also analyzing how can we adjust certain strategies, and how do we start to look at work differently in terms of how we're archetyping and creating new jobs of the future, and using skills as Lego blocks to say, well, we know that we need this new job coming up. It's going to be a part of this job and a part of this job. How do we pull those skills out and create something brand new that now we can start either reskilling people towards, or start recruiting more effectively to do that? And so this is a flywheel effect, that if we can start to build in this strategic work, we will see that ROI come through with our full talent lifecycle, and reducing the cost of talent holistically. We go to the next one. Why do market connected skills matter? And this is a little preview of, when we are tracking, our 3,000 plus skills that are in our skill taxonomy, we're tracking how all the different connections are moving along with it. So which job titles is it connected to? Which other skills? What's the salary observations? What's the supply of the skill versus the demand for the skill? Which companies are using it? What job titles are they using those skills on? And so as we've open sourced this, we've gotten adoption of over 200 HR tech and ed tech partners are using Lightcast data in some capacity to help drive better intelligence in their platforms. Many have adopted our open skills taxonomy, which is the global standard for tracking these skills, because we update them monthly, and so we're bringing in all of those brand new skills that matter for your company, and even adjacent companies that you're thinking about going into different business lines. And so all of this is, and Akash will show some of this, is how do we assign not 33,000 skills, but how do we assign the right, maybe a few hundred or 1,000 skills to our jobs so that we get down to the nuances of what skills matter to our business and how we describe the work, and how do we push that into the workflows that we're using for learning and career pathways and things like that. So you get dual value out of a open sourced, market connected skill taxonomy, where it's useful for organizing the data within your internal systems, but it still holds that connection to the outside world, so we can track how that skill changes, and we can track the adjacent skills and when we would need to switch out those skills for our organization.
And Mark, this is actually what makes our partnership very unique, because what we've been hearing from our customers at Bridge is, hey, Akash, I've spent maybe a year or two building this job architecture and mapping skills and competencies, but I have to re-update it now, only 12 to 18 months later, and it's quite time consuming. Or if they buy an off-the-shelf kind of skill or competency framework, the
Yes.
nature of how things are moving for a particular job, it's changing quite rapidly. And so maybe not for all the jobs, but maybe for the critical jobs that your business needs, they just don't have that insight. And I think this
Yes.
is what, we'll show later, but this type of data inside your learning management system can be quite powerful to help you target the right roles and the right skills from an upskilling perspective.
Yep, you're spot on. We don't want to do the manual work of updating static taxonomies. We want something that's dynamic and moving, and being able to get those signals from the market of when to change. And like you said, not all jobs are created equal, and we can help segment out which jobs are moving faster than others, so that you don't have to redo your job architecture every year. It's more of like, let's pick those pockets of the most important jobs and make sure that those are up to date. And so one of the things that we want, and as you start to talk about this with your internal teams and saying, hey, this might be interesting, how do I even start to deploy skills? And how do I start to pull this in? Well, one way obviously is through the Bridge platform and starting to assign skills to the job architecture, so we can start to assign learning more specifically to the skills that matter to those jobs. But like I mentioned before, for planning and benchmarking, this is where we want to involve your talent management and your comp team. Usually the comp team is managing the job architecture, and say, who is deciding on where the future of work is going for our organization? How are we connecting with business leaders to understand what they need, and how do we solution against that, so that we can be adjusting our job architecture and our job descriptions to keep pace, so that we can recruit effectively, we can move people around when we do create a new job, and lift and shift someone into a new job. And how do we upskill the folks that do have a change in their skill profile? We need to be using this as our core, and then breaking down that silo to talk with the hiring managers and talk with the recruiting team around how do we optimize hiring and use skills to our advantage. Making sure L&D team is there, making sure the talent management team is, how are we applying this to career pathways? And so this is a skills, as it touches everything in our business, is a good thing to help say we need to get out of these silos, and we all have a benefit if we can work together on building some governance around the strategy and being able to deploy skills in the right pockets. Everybody can get a win from taking this approach. And so we wanted to briefly talk about, like, what does a typical HR tech stack look like? There's many different, whether you have assessment vendors of different applicant tracking systems and marketplaces and learning systems. This is, usually within each, if those systems are all different platforms, they have a unique skill library or taxonomy within them, and they don't talk to each other. And as we try to pull over centralized insights, it's really difficult. We have to do our own harmonization. We have to get things to align. We have to start to say, well, now that we have this internal data, how do we actually benchmark it? And what a lot of people come to us, they say, hey, we just need to know our employee skills. And I said, well, that's interesting. Is like, if we do get your employee skills, what are you actually going to do with that? It's really interesting data. But when you get an employee skill inventory, it's their entire career history. You don't know what applies to the job that they're in today. And so the other side of that coin, to be able to figure out skill gaps, is to say, how do we understand the job profile skills and what skills are expected for each of our jobs within our job architecture? And that is the two sides that we need to actually do a calculation around skill gaps. And on the next slide, we'll show, how do we harmonize this with a common skill language? So now we can move from saying, hey, even though we might have a unique language in each one of those different systems, we can pull this through and classify it into one. And now we have a way to create harmony between those systems, especially for our reporting systems. And if we do that in an open source language, we can connect it back to that external labor market data, so that we get that dual value, which we mentioned before. So we want our employees interacting with all of the systems where skills can be gathered, because we want to be able to keep that supply of skills fresh in what they have, but we also want to be managing the job architecture and the job profile skills to make sure that these are the skills that we need to run our business, and how the new jobs and different jobs will be changing over time, especially with AI disruption, and be able to flow this through so that we can unlock that intelligence, benchmark it against the external world, and then unlock some of those strategic workforce planning use cases. So Akash, I don't know if you want to mention
Yeah,
here on how this kind
I
of comes
think
together.
I think this is another for the folks on the call, another great example of the Lightcast kind of bridge partnership. When I first joined Bridge and was starting to build out kind of the skills and employee development strategy, we were working with our customers, and a lot of them, very similar to what Mark had shared, they had a different taxonomy for like a career planning product that they had, or a different skill taxonomy for their LMS. And when they were thinking about data and analyzing what really are my skill gaps, it was all very custom, it was all very static. And so the first thing that we introduced in Bridge was this concept of the open skills taxonomy that Mark just shared a whole lot about, right? This idea that you have one skill library for both your LMS and for your talent marketplace or career planning a product. And that makes it so much more easier for you to really hone in on what are the most mission critical skills for your job role, so that you can have the right type of content and learning that's available. So I want to transition. So a lot of this conversation we just had was around the value of labor market data in this ever rapid evolving world. What I want to talk about now is how do you put that into action within a learning management system. And typically when I'm working with customers, we always hear the question, well, do I really need to rethink my skill strategy or my learning strategy? And I always say that if you're hearing a couple of these type of anecdotes bubbling in internally, either from the leadership team or even from your direct, employees or managers, it might actually be the right time. The most evident one is usually when someone's asking, hey, what skills does our business actually even need? Do our people even have those skills? Or from a learning, if you're an L&D professional, you might have an LMS or a content platform today, but people aren't engaging with the learning or courses. That might also be a good time to start thinking about, a new skill strategy. And then quite often, even managers start to become frustrated. They don't know how to target, career and skill development to their people to make them more productive and efficient with all this disruption. So if you're hearing any of this stuff, what I'd like to talk about is it all starts with kind of having a skills first strategy. And when you're designing that strategy, one of the biggest principles that we talk about with our customers at Bridge is that you really need to build a powerful partnership between your learners or your employees and your overall business. And that happens because you provide purpose to your employees so that they can discover the right skills at the right time within your business and start really planning. You're empowering them to plan their career development. And the value by doing that is they will start sharing some valuable insights around where their interests are, what skills they're actively working on. And that data allows you as a business now to really target development to the right people at the right time. And so one of the things, and I'm going to be going through this in actually a live demo here in a few minutes, but one of the things that I like to share is that it all starts with, one, as a business, you need to understand what are the skills my organization needs. And within the Bridge platform, again, with the partnership of Lightcast, we can actually look at all the jobs that you have in your business, and using artificial intelligence and labor market data, we can share with you, here are the most critical skills for your business in your particular industry. And you can tag it with those skills, but then using that same skill taxonomy, you're also using AI to tag all your learning and training content. And why that's powerful is because when you take the jobs and the skills for the jobs and the content that's mapped to the same skills, you can start driving real engagement to your learners. One, you're showing your learners what skills they need for their roles that they should be focused on. But two, then you can actually drive more recommendations for the learning and training that you already have. Again, that goes back to that earlier chart that Mark was sharing, where when you have one common language of skills in your organization, you can really start doing a lot more targeted learning and development. On top of that, within the Bridge platform, we really are about empowering kind of the employee manager relationship when it comes to skills development. And there's a lot of tools where managers are empowered to have career conversations, understand the drivers of their employees, and then actually get more targeted around what are the critical skills that my direct reports need to focus on, so that they can build, more targeted development plans to get them to where they need to be. And all of this activity, right, that's happening within the platform is actually providing you as L&D professionals or HR and talent professionals really valuable data around learning ROI. You're able to see over time the progression of a skill that users might have had that were low mastery, and you're able to provide the right type of coaching to managers on who they need to focus on at a particular time in your business. So I'll be showing a lot of this. This is, I promise, the last slide before we hop into the demo. But this is kind of a good slide I like to share around not only the partnership between Bridge and Lightcast, but this is kind of a journey with our Bridge customer base that they go through. We try to really make it simple for them to very quickly identify the right skills for their business. Then we'll show them how you can take all your learning and training content and tag that to the same skills. And then really steps 3, 4, and 5 is the engagement in the upskilling and reskilling. So the learners are now empowered to have the right type of content available to them, recommended to them at the right time. They can build more targeted skill plans, and over time, they can start requesting what we call skill feedback or peer feedback to see if they're actually improving. And all of that data, again, goes back to giving your managers and your L&D professionals real training ROI. What's the right type of content that we should be purchasing? What content actually or learning is effective in actually building the skills that we need? So I'm going to hop out now, and let's actually dive into how this looks like. And we're going to start with step 1. This is the Bridge platform. You can very quickly upload a list of your job titles that your business actually has. And what we can help you do is the AI is scanning each one of the job titles and will notify you. If we see a particular job title that you have and you don't know what skills it needs, we can actually say, okay, customer service director, in the labor market, typically we see this job title be called Director of Customer Service. And so very quickly, you can see, hey, here are the most commonly found skills in the labor market for Director of Customer Service. And you, as an L&D professional or an HR professional, can quickly kind of adopt them. You're more than welcome to add any of your custom skills if there are any. But the idea and the goal behind the Bridge system is, hey, we want to make sure that if you haven't built your skill taxonomy for your business, you can at least get 80% of the way there. We can use, again, the power of what Mark was talking about earlier, the labor market data. We can scan these jobs, we can narrow it down to your industry and suggest you the right type of skills in the labor market. And I don't know, Mark, maybe you can tell me, but typically the skill taxonomy for Lightcast, it's refreshed what, every 2 weeks, or is it once a quarter? It's pretty
Yeah, so
pretty.
it's really quick. So actually the taxonomy itself is monthly, but the insights of skills associated with job titles and getting you the expected skills, that is nightly. So we're tracking new data every single day through the job posting feed of, like I mentioned, 10 million job postings coming in. So we're able to see what are companies posting for, what are the most popular skills associated with different job titles. And so that's exactly what you're experiencing here is like, what are the top expected titles? And that changes daily.
Yeah, perfect. And so, you're able to get up and running pretty quickly by mapping skills, and then you can always see the new recommended skills if there are any changes for your business. And typically, whenever we're talking about skills with our customers, they're always saying, hey, we're not ready for it because they haven't built this type of taxonomy. And so within Bridge, we're trying to make that easier. And this is just part one, right? So now that, let's say you've built your taxonomy with skills mapped to all your job roles, part two is, well, we've got a lot of training with in the Bridge system that we've, imported. We've got a lot of courses, maybe live trainings, journeys, or pathways. What you can do in Bridge is you can go into any particular, let's just say course or training content, and let's say you haven't mapped it to skills yet. What the Bridge platform can do, again, with the partnership with Lightcast, is we can analyze the entire course that you have, and we can allow you to auto tag the learning or training content that you have to skills. And the power, again, that I'm trying to draw the connection for folks is this is the same skill taxonomy. Whatever skill taxonomy you're using to build your jobs, you're actually using the same taxonomy to map your learning or training content. And by doing that, there's a lot of different now benefits for your learners. So this is kind of on the administrative side from authoring and L&D to set up Bridge. But once you've mapped the jobs and the content to skills, you're empowering your learners with more purpose. So this is kind of an employee profile in Bridge. Jane is now, whenever she's going to fill out her profile, she doesn't have a blank canvas to start from. She's going to get suggestions based on her job title that either you have mapped, right, in the talent marketplace that I shared earlier, or again, leveraging labor market data, we can show for this particular job, here are the most relevant skills people might possess. And again, that can allow her very quickly to fill out a skill profile that makes sense for her today. And on the same way that you're mapping content and jobs on the back end, the power of the system is as your users are filling out their profile, we are now able to, in real time, in the learning library, target the training to the right people based on not only their job specific skills, but purely if they have personal kind of skills that they're interested in developing, any content or training you have available, it's going to be able to be pushed to them. So it all starts again with those first two pieces of mapping your jobs and then mapping your skills, and then or mapping your content. And then for the employee, what we can do is we can take it one step further. As they're thinking about, having a better conversation with their manager, I need to be more targeted around my skill development. You can take those skills that the user shared on their profile, and Jane can, in this example, build a pretty powerful development plan. She can say, hey, here are the 3 skills I chatted with my manager that right now, maybe for this next quarter, I want to focus on. And for each skill in the development plan, you can create objectives, you can add tasks, and obviously enroll yourself in kind of learning pathways or journey. And let's say you're getting ready to maybe complete this development plan for a particular skill. We can use this example of time management. Bridge doesn't stop there. It's not just about having a plan, but we want to make sure you're getting kind of continuous feedback, seeing if you're progressing in a particular skill. So within the system, you can actually request peer feedback. And it could be from your manager, it could be from some of your teammates. And if we take that time management example, again, we can see here in the past, Jane requested feedback on time management. She sent it to 5 people. 3 of her peers actually even responded. And they're now showing that she's demonstrating high mastery. They can give her even comments in the field of, hey, it's actually pretty clear now that Jane is feeling less stressed at work, or she's finishing her projects a lot more in a timely manner than she was before. So this is the type of kind of insights you can provide, just the learner in general, giving them more empowerment to consume learning and training within your business. Jane, on top of that, can also work with her manager to build a kind of a career vision. So the development plan is what we like to call near-term, short-term planning, very, very tactical with the manager, but long-term within the organization, Jane and her manager can have a conversation around what's motivating you, what's driving you. We actually have a really powerful exercise that we developed here at Bridge that allows the employee, the manager, to identify what drives them. And on top of that, long-term planning. So as we think about those future roles, where can I go in my business? Again, since you've built that taxonomy on the back end with your jobs mapped to skills, you can allow Jane to kind of talk to her manager and share what skills for the future roles she might be interested in. So that's a little bit of what I like to call the employee journey or learner journey around how you activate skills with the power of labor market data. But all of this activity that's happening in the platform, I'm going to now transition to like a manager. Jane, if she's a manager, she can actually see now in real time how her team is performing. So here are all the skills that her team, for the jobs for her team she needs. And she can actually see, as she clicks through any of these skills, like let's just say promoting diversity. Hey, one of her employees, recently got assessed, Billy, he's performing at a medium mastery versus, Tom over here is high mastery. This type of insight gives Jane as a manager, hey, when I'm thinking about that development plan, with Billy, I might know what skill I probably should be having conversation with. Or when I'm talking to my, L&D counterpart, I might be talking about more training or learning for this particular skill. And you could do that again, for any of the skills, but this is the level of kind of transparency and data that managers can kind of get. And on top of that, so that's just peer feedback, you can get strengths of like what we call like skill coverage. So if you, for Jane's entire team, for their respective roles, Jane can kind of see through the skill feedback, how much coverage do I really have, and what critical skills maybe I should be focusing right now that my team can be developing. And as you see this from the lens of the manager, for you as a business, as an L&D professional, you get an aggregate view in Bridge of what we like to call our skill mastery report. And this is, again, looking at it at a macro view, specifically across your organization. What are the critical skills that you do have high mastery in? What are the skills that you have moderate mastery in, and again, low mastery? These are probably the skills that we should be focused on as a business, either again, upskilling, reskilling, because as Mark was sharing earlier, there is going to be a labor shortage, or if we have to, here are the skills we probably need to get fresh talent from the outside and focus our recruiting efforts on. So that's a little bit about, again, how we've activated skills using labor market data directly within, a learning platform like Bridge. I did want to spend a few moments sharing with this group, where are we going with this? And I think long term, for us at Bridge, we want to take this again one step further. You saw a little bit of personalization in terms of the recommendation of the content or the mapping of the jobs to skills and the content to skills. But for the end learner, our vision at Bridge is, we're a developmental LMS, and we're creating a talent marketplace directly within the Bridge platform. And the idea of this talent marketplace is the system is going to continually learn about the employee. It's going to learn about their skills, their long-term career interests, and we want to be more proactive at showing them already, hey, based on that learning activity that you did and the feedback you've already gotten from your manager and your peers, there's some interesting career paths for you right now within our business. You might want to be thinking about that. And you can click around, and it's like this rich discovery experience. You can learn about these future roles to kind of carve your path within your business. And then on top of that, a lot of organizations are thinking about, career mobility or internal mobility. Well, if the employees are actually building the right careers and developing the right skills, how can we unlock the right type of job opportunities to them directly in Bridge? We're not building a recruiting platform. Bridge is an LMS, but we can integrate over time to show, as people complete career paths, what jobs could be interesting for them within the business. And then mentorship. This is one within the Bridge platform that we have available right now, where you can, when you're searching for a particular skill, you can see who within that skill is interested in maybe helping you develop it. But we will be using AI now to recommend the right type of mentor-mentee matches. So if you're building a specific career plan or developing certain skills, who right now at that given time, maybe someone in that role, might be interesting for you to have a conversation with. So facilitating more community-based skill learning is a big part of this talent marketplace vision. And then I shared with you what the feedback looks today within Bridge, but we want to take this to the next level. How can you leverage AI to recommend at the right time when you should request feedback? Or how can you validate even some of these skills through maybe AI-based knowledge checks or learning? That is going to be something that we as a team on the Bridge product team will be building. And finally, where we started all this journey, let's make sure that the right type of content is available, to author for your business in Bridge, and then two, how do you get it in front of the right people at exactly the right time? Those are some of the things that, are very, very important to us. And we will continue down the path of, again, leveraging labor market data so that your business is, again, more resilient and adaptive as opposed to having a static framework. And I think that about wraps us up today. I will see if there's any questions in the chat. We can talk about taking them. I did also want to share with folks that we will be sharing this entire recording, the slides. Mark mentioned that we'll also share a copy of the reports. But if you all are interested in, getting information immediately, definitely leave a +1 in the chat, and we'll make sure that someone kind of reaches out to you to start the conversation. And it looks like, I think, oops, so it looks like the chat wasn't working, but there might have been questions.
While you're checking that, Akash, one of the number one questions I get from most of our prospects and customers is, where do I even start on this journey. And we always say don't try to tackle every job at once, but focus in on one particular business unit, run some pilot testing, even a small job family to say, hey, maybe our IT team needs some deep dive on this. Let's run a pilot of assigning skills to those jobs, or maybe our sales team, since those are the revenue drivers for our team. Let's ensure that we get the right upskilling to those, and do a small pilot, assign those skills, start to connect in tagging the learning content to those skills, and then do some change management with those managers to say, here's what we've just enabled. Let's train this to our team and point them in the right direction. And to me, the biggest win in all of this is enabling a better one-on-one skill development conversation with your manager. Even if you don't use any of the fancy tools, but you've taken the time to identify some of those skills for each job, and you have that available for the managers to talk with their employees, that is a win right there, because now you're getting more specific about their development, talking about their career path of where they want to go next. And so I say start small, run a pilot, and to start playing with it and seeing how it affects the day-to-day between the employees and the managers.
I think that's about it. I did see that the chat definitely wasn't working. If there is any other questions, be sure, please reach out to both Mark and myself. We'd love to connect with you all. Like I said earlier, we will be sending again the video to your email, along with some of those reports, and even a sneak peek of some of the things that I demoed. But we really appreciate everyone's time, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bridge team, for hosting me.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.